Good morning. This is the I Need More Money radio show. I'm your host, Matt Manero, coming to you from our studios in Dallas, Texas. This show is an important show because we talk about money. We don't talk about it in theory. We give real practical ways for you, the listening audience, to get better at money. It all dovetails to my new book, which comes out in 2017, called, guess what? I Need More Money. The book was picked up by Penguin Publishing, a division of Random House, a top 4 publisher. Why? Because they believe, just like I do, that money is an epidemic. Tens of millions of people don't have enough money. That's why I wrote the book, and that's why I bring this show to you every Thursday, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. But what we also do on this show is we bring you smart, talented people who can help us in this rebuilding of our money situation. And on today's show, I'm happy to have Kathy Fettke. Kathy is the CEO of the Real Wealth Network. She's also a best-selling author of the book Retire Rich with Rentals. She's constantly seen on CNN, CNBC, Fox, Bloomberg, and NPR. And she does a very successful podcast called the Real Wealth Show Podcast. It is my pleasure on today's show to have Kathy Fettke. Kathy, are you with us?
I am. Hello.
Awesome. It's such a nice treat to have you on the I Need More Money radio show today. Thanks for taking the time.
Oh, thanks so much.
You got it. So, Kathy, as you can see, we get right into it on this show. I mean, we're really not a theory kind of a show. We're a practical show where our listening audience can get real life benefits that hopefully, after listening to us for a little bit, they can put into play in their life. So before we get into your success, Kathy, in showing thousands and thousands of people how to use real estate to improve their passive income, their cash flow, and their net worth, let's talk a little bit about your money journey, Kathy. Take me back to the early days. Where were you raised?
I was actually raised in Atherton, California, which is today probably one of the wealthiest suburbs of San Francisco. But at the time, my dad bought a house there for $99,000. I think probably about $4 or $5 million today. He was a dentist with 5 kids, and we kind of lived a middle-class lifestyle because all his money went to raising us. But I also, got the opportunity to see what it was like to be self-employed and to be in control of your destiny.
So you had an entrepreneurial feeling going on in your household from a very early age, I assume.
Exactly. Yeah. If it was to be, it was up to him. He had to make it happen, and that included marketing and doing excellent work and providing a service and making a difference. And also, totally by accident, he also bought the right properties. They just happened to be homes that we lived in, but those homes probably made us more money than any investment he ever actually intentionally made.
Yeah, sure. Or the practice itself, probably, right? The practice covered the cash flow needs of the properties that appreciated at rates that you'd have to say in that part of the country there's some luck, too. Who would have ever thought that it would have exploded like it did there?
Exactly. Yep.
But what about your mom, Kathy? What was she doing? Was she entrepreneurial, or did she work, or was her job to make sure you 5 were well handled?
Yes, her work was raising 5 kids, so she was quite busy. But I was raised a very Christian background, so in their opinion, a woman shouldn't work outside the house, and so the whole point of sending me to college was to get my MRS. To find myself a husband. They didn't really believe in women working, so I kind of broke that belief system. But, life has changed a lot since then. That was 30, 40 years ago.
Isn't that interesting?
I wasn't raised in a family where I was supposed to be contributing financially.
Wow. And what was the breakdown between brothers and sisters?
I had 3 sisters and a brother.
And so was the idea truly, the conversation was not for you and your 3 sisters to go out into the marketplace and grab market share and produce. It was truly to follow in your mother's role? Is that reasonable to say? It's an unusual statement
100%.
even to hear today. Wow.
Yeah. My mom couldn't even go to a church where there was a woman in any kind of leadership role. It was a very different kind of belief system. But ironically, it was my mother who would kind of whisper in my dad's ear, wow, we should probably buy more of these homes. And I mean, in Menlo Park, Atherton, they were $70,000 at the time. Yeah. And, he was like, oh, no, that's crazy. But, had she kind of stood in her power and understood her, the strength of her intuition or, her common sense, and I'm not saying my dad didn't have that, but he was busy with his business. I'd be a trust fund kid today. Yeah. I would never have to work because if they had done what I'm teaching people to do, those $60,000 homes are, again, several million each today.
Yeah, we all have those stories, though, right? It's amazing that your mom had that foresight, but we all have those stories. I remember a guy telling me that for some beach property in North Carolina in the mid 80s, you could have bought oceanfront property in this section of North Carolina for $7,500. And, of course, now it's $1 million plus. Well, sounds good, but who had the $7,500 in the mid 80s, right? Your dad was trying to take care of 5 mouths and a wife and keep the business going. There wasn't an extra 40, 50, 70 grand sitting around to make those moves, probably.
Well, there probably was. He just, he invested, but he just didn't understand real estate. And, hindsight 2020, right? But, he invested in a lot of companies that did not have collateral. So he invested in businesses, business ideas, and any of his actual strategic business investments did not go well because there was no collateral. It was investing in somebody's idea. And, that's why you can't walk into a bank today and just go get a business loan. You can, but not nearly as easily as just going in and getting a loan on a property because there's collateral. Yeah. The business doesn't work, your money's gone. And unfortunately, that's what happened to my dad and most of his investments. But like I said, he did buy real estate, and it was actually the real estate that has held my mom, has fed my mom since his passing. It's what's keeping her alive,
Gotcha.
So, fed and sheltered. It was the accidental investments in real estate that have, taken care of her.
Very interesting. Would you say your dad was, would you say he was extremely conservative with his investments? Or it sounds like he really was a little bit of a high flyer and looking at taking some big risks because maybe one or two of those companies could have panned out for the big money.
He was conservative. Like I said, he had 5 kids, and we all went to college, and he took good care of us. We took vacations together, and most of his money went to raising us. But he did invest, and he loved investing. His biggest mistake, I think, when it came to money, is that he would invest with people in his church or friends, and didn't really understand necessarily what he was investing in. It was more of a trusting this person because they go to my church kind of thing. Yeah. And again, I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying that it was risky. Any business startup is risky. I don't care which one. That's why venture capitalists, they have big dollars that they can afford to lose. If they invest $1 million in 20 companies, there's a good chance one of those is going to take off, but most of us don't have that flexibility. Yeah. So, the last thing you want to do when building wealth is invest in a startup if it's your last dollar. If you've got millions to throw around, that's a different story, but most of us don't have that.
So, it's an interesting evolution because the reality is so many people are still in the exact situation that your dad was in, with the exception that they may not have what I refer to as the platform, the money machine that a dentist in a strong demographic area has. There's lots of people that have a family that still need to be taken care of, and maybe they didn't make the right choice to be a dentist or a business owner or something, and they're starting to ask this question of, how am I going to do it? I'm in my 40s, I'm behind on my retirement, my college funds for my kids are underfunded, The cash that I thought I should have, I thought I would be filthy rich by the time I was 30 or 40. It's not there. So it's still, that same issue is still going on in millions and millions of people's lives today, except it's harder to hit the lottery by buying a $90,000 house and having it worth millions today. It's harder today. Don't you agree?
Right. Yeah, I'm not saying that's going to ever happen again. That was a lucky situation where I happened to be born and raised in what became the Silicon Valley. So who could have predicted that? You know, nobody even knew who Bill Gates was or Steve Jobs. You know. Yeah. But you know, it's you can't always predict, but you can kind of predict. So if you stay on top of what's happening and the changes coming. If you can see those changes, and unfortunately most people look at the past when making decisions rather than forecasting the future. And I'm not saying, you know, you could get your crystal ball out and you know, figure it out that way, but you can look at trends and you can look at demographic changes and you can forecast to some ability, which could put you in a situation, not where you buy an $80,000 house that's worth $5 million 20 years later, but where you can take care of your family and you can retire wealthy through your investment.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, there are predictability indexes and indicators along the way, but the reality that I think most people really don't understand is that it doesn't really take money to make money. It takes courage to make money. It takes guts. It takes the ability to pull the trigger. And I waited way too long to start to pull the trigger on some of my external investments other than my business. But once you do it a few times, you really begin to hopefully develop your own system. And then once the predictability index starts to fire up, then you're ready to go. But before I get into your development of predictability, walk us through how you morphed from that sort of an upbringing and mindset into a very powerful CEO of a real estate firm. How did that happen for you?
Well, you know, for me, it was really pretty much by accident as well. Excuse me. Accident, but a determination for sure. So about 13 years ago, I was basically living the dream. Wonderful husband, beautiful two young girls, little children. I was doing what my mom would have been proud of. I quit my job in the news media, where I wanted, you know, to be a well-known anchor woman, and you know, my whole family was like, "You need to stay home and raise kids." Well, anyway, when I did get married and have children, I agreed. I just wanted to be home and raise those children, and I knew that it was a very short window of opportunity. Yeah. And then my husband's career was taking off. He had just written a book called Extreme Success, which was based on his extreme sports and how you apply, you know, pushing through fears to, to be successful in business. And he was traveling the country on, Good Morning America and U.S. He was all over the place.
He was doing the circuit.
And I was home, you know, taking care of the kids, and he walked in one day with tears in his eyes because he had just come back from the doctor. They checked on what turned out to be melanoma. More tests showed that it may have spread, and when that happens, melanoma is very quick moving. And the doctor basically told my husband he had 6 months at best. And so that was a game changer, as you can imagine.
Amazingly powerful, my gosh. How did that finish?
I want to let you know that he's healthy today.
That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah, he is healthy today, and it's okay, and the doctor was wrong. It had, whatever had spread, it was taken care of, but at the time we didn't know. And so, when you get that kind of news, the last thing you want to do is spend the last 6 months of your life working, right? Yeah. So I had to figure out how to take over the finances and give him the best 6 months of his life if the doctor was right. And so in that moment, most times, our darkest, most challenging times are what has us dig deep and find parts of ourselves we didn't know existed, Yeah, and that's what happened to me. Like I had been a stay-at-home mom for a while. I'd been making maybe $1,000 to $2,000 a month on the side which was just good for vacations and fun stuff, gifts and such. But I had to figure out how to make $10,000 a month and cover the $4,000 a month mortgage of the big, huge house we just bought. You know. Oh.
No, that's serious stuff. I know. Just before we move off of that, because I think it's such a powerful story that. We have the similar situation. It's my brother-in-law. It happened to my brother-in-law. It's actually the core story of my book that I was referencing in the beginning. But my brother-in-law unfortunately didn't get the good news that you and your family got, and he died almost 1 year to the day. 46 years old, 4 kids. He died with no health insurance, no life insurance, and $100 in the bank. And
I'm so sorry.
Those are those moments that you're referencing, though, where real life just sort of drops something in your lap, and you're forced to deal with. And I agree that so many times those are the catalysts for the success stories. But just as a takeaway for our audience, and it's a primary takeaway in my book, that you don't have to have those for you to have the wake-up call, because you can actually manifest that story and that process in your mind long before it happens, and hopefully, knock on wood, it never happens in someone's family. But you can build that stress point and turn it into the catalyst, even though it's not real. And sometimes I believe people need to actually do that to generate a wake-up call that you went through in real life, and my family went through in real life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, something, like I said, if everything's just fine, then you ride the wave, and it's just when times are turbulent that you have to discover how to survive, and so I had to dig deep, and I was determined to become wealthy, and not just to take over the finances, which, by the way, were completely drained, as I'm sure you understand, from medical bills. Everything we had done right, which was to save and invest, and that was gone pretty quickly. Yep. And so it really started with this 100% determination that I would figure it out. Mm-hmm. I didn't have the answer, but I had 100% commitment to finding it. And I believe that was the shift that Rich had with his health, was a shift to, I'm going to 100% figure this out too. Yeah. And 100% of me is committed to living. And so, that's what happened for me. I just was like, I had a radio show at the time. I had kept that from my broadcast days, but I wasn't making any money at it. Right. But I thought I'll use that show to find out how. Much like you, that show's called The Real Wealth Show. It's a podcast. Still today, it was one of the first podcasts. Back then, my husband was like, "Hey, there's this thing called podcasting," and he took my radio show and did that. Nobody listened because nobody knew how to podcast back then.
Right. You were an early adopter of something that became very, very, very popular. Sure. But Kathy, let's So let's talk about it, though, because there's someone out there listening to us on this show or your podcast who is relating to what the two stories we just shared, but they still don't know tactically what the heck to do. So what was step 1, 2, 3 that you started to put into place that began to change this around and allow you, with the effort, the skilling up, all this stuff that you were doing, to really begin to put it into place and get momentum? So walk us through the step 1, 2, and 3.
Well, step 1 is you got to kind of get your cash flow in order. Being broke is tough. So you just got to find out how to make cash flow now. And, like I said, we had bought this big house, this big mortgage payment when things were good. And then when things were bad, that became quite a burden. But at the same time, there was a way to flip it and make it an opportunity. And this was before I even knew about real estate investing, which was All I knew is I had a big house with a bunch of rooms, and my husband went rock climbing one weekend, and he came home, and every nook and cranny of that house was rented out. It was like desperation, man. We needed to make the mortgage, and I made it. And so I put the kids in one room and rented out the other room, and then I found out that these foreign exchange students would pay $600 each to share a room, so I brought them in, and we were waiting in the line just to go to the bathroom in our own home, but we had cash flow. We did what we needed to do.
But hang on, I can't move off of that, because first it's like, Rich, meet your new roommates, right? That's funny. But then secondly, there had to have been a little bit of an eating of humble pie, because I assume that it was a lovely house in a nice neighborhood, and then maybe you guys had to say, well, what are the neighbors going to think, honey? Are the neighbors going to think that the Fettkes don't have enough to cover the bills here? So walk me through that, because I think so many people live in this false positive, which is this silliness that they think they're doing better than they really are. It's the big house with no furniture type of a thing, right?
Right.
So how did you handle that? How did you guys eat that humble pie and say, look, this is what we're going to do?
We didn't have a choice. It was like lose the house or make it work. And, there was a lot of humble pie being eaten. I was shopping, because of the school district we were in, my kids were going to school with very wealthy children. And, they wanted certain clothing that, they wanted brands, and that's important to kids at that age. And, we had to teach them, you're not getting those. So, we'll find you something cute. It would be our Saturdays were shopping at garage sales, and I would give the kids each $1, and that's what they would get. And they found cute things, but it was hard for them too, because if you're not wearing the right brand at a certain age, you get made fun of, and so our kids had to deal with that, and be able to look at people and say, well, this is a nice pair of shoes. They work.
There's so much in that, though.
Strengthen our kids too.
There's so much there, Kathy, because I believe that all schools, obviously most private schools do uniforms. I believe all public schools should do uniforms as well, because it removes that equation from the kids' day. Because so many kids, I live in a real rich town too, and so many kids wake up and they start to think of, not just does this keep me warm, but what's the impression that it's going to give. And I think it's such a horrible way to teach our kids early on. All public schools should go to blue, red, white, and khaki or blue shorts or skirts, period, end of story, in my opinion. It would remove so much of the silliness and mind clutter that happens in that world right now.
I couldn't agree more. What's really funny about it all is that when we moved to Malibu, where it's the richest kids in the world, really, and this was a little later when things were better, of course, and when we got here, the kids in Malibu couldn't care less about labels. It was very funny, because they had gone beyond what most people are striving for. It was very interesting to be around great wealth. I mean, the richest people in the world, and to see that they dress like homeless people here. we have this game we play, which is a billionaire or a homeless person, because nobody here has anything
That's
to
awesome.
prove.
Well, they were the Joneses. They weren't keeping up with the Joneses. They had become the Joneses, right? So that's how it plays out.
Yeah.
So, Kathy, we got step one down, which is, hey, we're going to take a financial checkup. We're going to see where we are. Take us into step two as you see it, and also your journey, right? Tell me step two.
So the first step was to be able to pay, you got to find a way to pay your expenses, right? So we did that, and we cut back on all expenses. We, like I said, shopped at garage sales. I made meals. I'd buy the bulk food section, at stores and stuff, and we rented out rooms, and we got that stabilized. Second step was to figure out how to leverage, what I was already doing. I didn't have time to go learn a new profession, or, I was like, what do I have right now that I can use and leverage? And I still, like I said, I had that radio show. It wasn't making any money, so I thought, well, how do I shift that and make some money from it? And because it's something I knew I was good at. I wasn't going to go, try to get a career in something it would take me 3 or 4 years to learn. It was like, what am I good at now? And it was, radio. So I decided, well, one way people make money is sponsorship, right? So
Yep.
I dialed for dollars. I went down the phone book, It's like, you want to sponsor? You want to sponsor? Hey, I got this show. You want to sponsor? And days after days after days of dialing for dollars and not getting any. And I just paused and thought, okay, there's something I'm doing wrong because people advertise. I hear radio ads all the time. They're doing something I'm not. And it occurred to me, well, nobody wants to just give you money. Like if I called you today and say, you want to advertise on my show, you'd be like, I got other places to spend my money. You have to show value. And I was missing that piece. And so, I decided the next phone call I made would be irresistible. There's no way anybody could say no to it. It would be such an unbelievable offer that my next phone call would be a yes. And so I came from that place, like what would wow somebody? What would be like, oh my gosh, I got to do this now. And so I shifted my entire presentation to this. The next phone call was, hi there, I'm Kathy. I'm the host of The Real Wealth Show, and I wanted to know if you'd like to be featured in front of my audience of, thousands of listeners in the San Francisco Bay Area, and if you're good, I'm looking for a co-host.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the next, believe me, the next answer was yes.
Yeah.
And luckily for me, it was somebody who was actually quite good on the air. And this was my, they say luck is when preparedness meets opportunity. At least that's what my husband says in his book. So this is where luck came into place. I was prepared for this opportunity, but basically it turns out this guy was a real estate investor.
Mm-hmm.
So, to bring him on as a co-host, I came home and I was like, oh man, I just sold out, and now I've got this guy who it's going to be my co-host. And my husband said, well, his topic is mortgages, boring, but how could you make that interesting and human interest and, find out what people are doing with those mortgages. And like I said, lucky for me, what they were doing was buying assets that cash flow so they could retire. And it just ended up being the perfect topic. It was like I interviewed each of his clients to find out exactly what they were doing with those mortgages, how they were building wealth, how they were buying properties, fixing them up, refining, getting all their cash out and doing it again. There were so many topics that suddenly our audience just took off. Our phones started ringing off the hook with people who were like, I want to do that. I want to get mortgages. I want to invest. I want to buy assets with cash flow. And suddenly my sponsor, oh, by the way, when I gave away that huge, co-host position, let me tell you, I charged him a ton of money, much more than I'd been asking for prior, but I was giving more too. So, he looked at me and said, this show's been far more successful than I ever expected. There's no way I can handle these mortgages. You need to go get your license and take them. Take this business.
So now you're in the mortgage business. Now you're originating mortgages.
All of a sudden, I was a mortgage broker. Yeah, I got my license in like a month, and my very first loan, generated from the radio show, was $1 million loan.
Yeah.
I charged 1 point instead of 3. Some people would have been greedy and charged more, but I wanted to keep the rate low for him and offer great service, so I charged 1. 1% of $1 million loan is $10,000. I made $10,000 that day.
And you said to yourself, this is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Yeah, of course. You say now I found it. But here's, I think, again, I'm so concerned about takeaways for the audience because I believe a lot of people have good intentions, but they really don't know the steps. What I heard from those first 3 steps for you was not this huge visualization plan, this grand scheme that was, backed up by business plans and all that sort of stuff. It was survive. It was leverage what you currently are good at. So sort of connect to a superpower and then leverage up that superpower and then learn to sell and just get to doing. Just start doing. Well, do and figure it out later. That's what I like to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people will often, let me put it this way. The best way to explain the shift is like when you get married, there's a lot that you face through that marriage. And that you better be passionate and really like that other person because there will be challenges. And it's the same when you choose a career. You better love and be passionate about that career because the challenges will be so big that there's got to be something that a force that takes you through it, and that force is love.
Yeah.
And so, I love radio. I love helping people. I love teaching, and I love learning. And so, and now I didn't know then, but now I love building wealth and finding deals and helping other people find deals. But it was that love that got me through the difficult times, the love for my husband, the love for my family, the desire to be able to, create passive income so I could continue to be home with my children. That's what made it work and gave me the determination to keep going.
So we're moving right along here as we come up on the last 15 minutes of our show today, Kathy. We're moving really into what has it become. And I appreciate you walking us through the story and really telling us the genesis of how it happened. But now let's talk about where Real Wealth Network is now and what are the teachings that you are delivering to your clients that, again, our audience can take away. So the premise is use real estate to create passive income. And even if you're in Malibu or Atherton where the average person probably is going to have a very difficult time finding a cash flowing property, you help them see it on a nationwide scale. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I just got very, very lucky again that I had this platform, and I was able to bring on people onto my show who had been there before and could see. Here I was in the midst of the mortgage industry when it was nothing but fraud, and I came in at that time and was like, wow. My very first loan, not my very first loan, but one of the first loans I did, I turned it in to the bank, and the bank came back and said, I'm sorry, this person doesn't make enough money. And I was like, oh, okay. And they said, so we changed the amount they make, and now they qualify.
Wow.
And I said, oh. And I called my husband. I said, that doesn't sound right. And he goes, no, that sounds like fraud. Don't do it. And yet any other mortgage broker would do it. And when I denied that loan, they went to the person in the desk next to me and got it.
Yep.
So, fraud was prevalent in every area, not just the banks. It was the mortgage brokers and the borrowers. They knew exactly what was going on.
For sure. I mean, there's no question. But the silliness of that whole debacle, the silliness that the applicant or the people who were taking out the mortgages didn't know. It's so silly. It was a two-way street. Everybody knew what was going on. Everyone knew they were overbuying, but they just couldn't say no, and they just couldn't get out of this concept of false positive. It is what it is. I'm thankful that is over with now, and that it has become, because I'm in the lending business. We finance commercial fleet vehicles, and we have for the last 21 years. We'll do about $150 million this year in small ticket financing, and we understand that business backwards and forwards. So I'm very happy that the froth came out of the marketplace. But let's talk about how, in your opinion, how does someone? Because I'm going to tell you my stance on I own commercial apartment complexes, and I can't stand single family houses for the simple fact of this. I don't think it moves the needle. If I buy a house and it produces $300 or $400 a month in positive cash flow for me, it just doesn't move the needle of net worth. And so, how do you help people in embracing that idea? I mean, do you say $300 a month times 10 equals 3,000, plus we have the equity buildup and all of that? Is that how you discuss single family, or do you guys talk more about duplexes or quadplex or multifamily? How does Real Wealth Network help these people in picking the right investment?
Yeah, I mean, it really just depends on who you are and at what level you're at. But, my audience is people who own single-family rental homes in the San Francisco Bay Area. That's where our show was, and that's where we've been building our following, although now it's worldwide. But if you've got $1 million house in the San Francisco Bay Area, it is negative cash flow, period. If you exchange that one property, you could buy 10 little, rental homes in working class neighborhoods, quintuple your cash flow. And, basically, I help people get out of the game, because I can't tell you how many people have made one simple change to their portfolio and have been able to retire just from that.
Absolutely.
So, that's one way we make it work. The other thing is that not everybody is able to get into commercial and not capable when they start out. So, if you again are in a high-priced market like San Francisco or Portland or Seattle, and you can't make the numbers work, you can't maybe even come out with a down payment for a primary residence, let alone for investment property in those areas, and then there's no cash flow, you just give up. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have the down payment to, get into commercial property, then it's like, the common belief is that's just for rich people. Mm. Whereas if you buy a $100,000 home, the cash flows, like you said, just $300 a month, but all you had to do is put $20,000 down. You leverage the rest.
Sure, there's 15% a year.
That gets you in the game.
You bet. I totally see that.
And then if
you can also get in the game, too, though, by just stacking and racking some cash as well, and then trying to leverage up relationships, which is basically what I did, right? I didn't go in as the lead investor on it. I went in with a group of people on these through the limited partnership route because I had saved and stacked and racked cash. And when the opportunity presented itself, I was able to go in, and it's been wonderful complementary investments to my business. So people can they can also understand that leveraging relationships and meeting new people and networking is vital to find deals. Would you agree with that?
100%, but you can't do that till you're confident and understand what you're doing. And so once again, until you can walk the talk and understand what you're talking about, and maybe because of your background in finance, you understood more than most people, but you got to have credibility. And so, once again, I can take somebody who maybe has $200,000 saved, and with that they can buy 10 homes, mm-hmm. $20,000 each on each home, and each house, like you said, is $300 a month cash flow, and so that's $36,000 a year. Now, if you've got an $80,000 mortgage on your homes, because they're just $100,000 homes, how quickly could you take that cash flow and use it to pay off one of those mortgages? In a little over 2 years. Yeah. And so, with that accelerated payoff plan, that person who put in $200,000 to acquire 10 properties can use the leverage and the cash flow to pay off all of those mortgages in 12 to 13 years. Now they have $1 million portfolio cash homes, and they're bringing in about $100,000 a year passive income.
Yeah.
And most people can live on that. So, that's a way we show people to get out of the rat race, to get into passive income. Now, after that, if you've got $1 million portfolio, well, you can do whatever you want. Invest, and people will listen to you too. Sure, then you can start getting investors to lend to you and friends to lend to you and doing deals together when you can show a track record.
It's true, though. You got to start. You've got to start. And the reality is most people literally don't know where to start, or they just feel as though it's a game for the rich folks, and so they have to stay and work for the rest of their lives. And the reality is you can do both, and I believe most people should be doing both. They shouldn't just be reliant solely on the W-2 check. They need to be building some passive stuff, because we just don't know where life throws us the curveball, as it happened to you and it happened to me, and it happens to so many people, not necessarily in health, but the pink slip comes. You thought you were doing a great job, and the company says you were doing a great job, but we're still eliminating you.
Yep, exactly. That's terrifying. I don't know how people can live that way, honestly.
So, Kathy, I want to thank you for your time on the show today. We are coming up to the end of the show and the hard break. I mean, we could go much deeper into the process of it, and maybe we could rehash this on another episode where we could actually take the audience and walk them through that $20,000 down on $100,000, and then the ability to take the positive cash flow, don't live on it, use it to pay down the debt on the existing properties, and then over a 10 or 12-year period of time, guess what? You've got a nice portfolio, zero debt service against it, and $100,000 in cash flow. I'd love to explore that at a later date, but that's the game, folks. That's how you win at the game. The key is you've got to find some catalyzing moment that tells you that you have to play the game harder. Would you agree with that?
I hope that people don't have to learn, do that. I hope that, I think younger people kind of seem to get it, and they're preparing, and there's a lot of people in their 50s going, oh my gosh, I'm 10, 15 years away from retirement and nowhere close. So hopefully you don't have to go through a hard time to understand what you need to do to prepare yourself for the future. But yes, it's definitely a catalyst when you're in this.
Yeah, no question about it. So, Kathy, let's talk about just a follow-up where people can find you. Obviously, you're the CEO of Real Wealth Network. Your book, Retire Rich with Rentals, that's available. And then the podcast, The Real Wealth Show, that's on iTunes. Is that correct?
That's right. Real Wealth Show is on iTunes.
Great.
And then our website is Real Wealth Network, where there's just a tremendous amount of free education there to help people get started. Once you join, which is free, you can meet with our investment counselors, and they'll help you come up with a plan, kind of look at your specific situation. And then I have a book that's really easy to read. I mean, I've had teenagers read it and say they love it and understood it. It's called Retire Rich with Rentals, and you can get that on Amazon.
That's awesome. Kathy, thank you for being on the I Need More Money radio show today. I appreciate your time, your insight, and your story. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been my pleasure. Talk again. Bye-bye. Hey guys, that's the finish of the I Need More Money show with Kathy Fettke. We're talking about real estate today. She shared her amazing story of what does it take to get from deeply challenged situations all the way to the end. And you know what it takes in my mind? It takes skill, it takes desire, it takes will, it takes courage. And yeah, it does take a little bit of bucks. So if you ain't stacking and racking cash, get back to that mindset. I'm your host, Matt Manero, on the I Need More Money radio show on Road Grid TV. Till the next time we talk, thanks.